Hey, welcome to the Atlantis channel. I'm so excited to have one of my mentors, someone that I have spent a lot of time with these last couple of months. Her name is Laurie Ann, and she has been teaching me all about breathwork. All about breathwork. She's one of the, I don't know if I would call you a mentor in the Pause Breathwork Facilitator training program. And so she has a depth of knowledge to her that never ends, never ends. You always have some like amazing, like, how do you even know that kind of response to any question that I ask or any of my fellow students ask? And I just love spending time with you, Laurie Ann. So I also want to name, I was going through Laurie Ann's website last night, and I was just like, I started scrolling through her trainings and certificates of the things that she has learned about and done and participated in, and it just like kept going. Like there was just so many things. And I love that one of the things you said in your bio section is that you were dedicated to a lifetime of learning. And I so resonate with that. I so feel that. And it's obvious. It's obvious not just in, you can make a list, but it's also obvious in the way that you show up and how you can teach any concept from many different angles. And I'm so grateful to know you and so grateful that you're sharing time with us today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I love seeing you, and I'm glad that we get to have this conversation. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. You're so welcome. So the first question, if anyone looks up Laurie Ann on Instagram, which of course I'll link her information below in the show notes. If you look her up on Instagram, she has so many letters next to her name. And I looked them up briefly, and I would love to know what they mean because I actually don't know. Like I see letters, I'm like, oh, so cool, like professional done stuff, but I'm also like, I don't actually know. So first one, PPNE. What does that one?
Yeah, yeah. So I'm a pre and perinatal educator. So I've studied pre and perinatal psychology, and that's something that I apply when I work with adults, but also more specifically when I work with parents. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, that makes total sense. Beautiful. Thank you. Okay, the next one's TTP.
Yeah. So I'm also I've trained in touch therapy. So that's what this credential is. And this is also something, I've trained in touch therapy with a focus on developmental trauma. I'm really, really passionate about development and how that impacts our experiences and that time impacts us and how powerful touch is to support our system when we've had those early ruptures, let's call them.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. This is making me want to go so many places, but there's one more, and it's CAHP.
Yeah. So I a few years ago, that's something that I did earlier on in my career. But when I started, I was very focused on like holistic wellness because before I started diving into somatic work, and I completed my clinical aromatherapy health practitioner certification. It's not necessarily something that I use, if I'm being honest. But it's just fun. It's just fun to play with it and to create some products for myself and my loved ones. So that's what this stands for.
Oh, thank you so much for telling me that because I'm always curious about people's acronyms. Is that the right word, acronym? But I just it's so cool to me that you have such a wide depth of knowledge or birth of knowledge there. Even with the aromatherapy, how cool. And like that can just come in useful randomly, and just I'm sure that it benefits you even if you're not using it directly. I'm sure it's benefiting you all the time. That is so beautiful. And then once again, along this path of education, Laurie Ann is also currently undergoing, let me make sure I get this correct, your second undergrad degree in psychology with a hope to go into grad school. Is that correct? To go into child psychology?
Yeah. So I started when I started studying somatics, which, as I was saying with touch therapy with different modalities, I really focus on those developmental type of pieces. And I had this desire to go beyond just what's arising in the body, which is one really big, really important piece, but also, understand more about development. So I decided to make the commitment to go back to school as an adult, which is not easy, but it's just been a really fun journey. And it's also very different than, when I was, let's say 19 or 20. It's different when you work for a living, you work with people. So there are things you learn in class and then you see it, in your clients, and you can make parallels that I didn't have access to at the time, definitely. So that's
Yeah.
really fun. Mhm.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's so cool. And that brings up something that I would really actually love to talk to you about, with all of your knowledge of the science and the trauma and the developmental stuff. I would actually really love to know how you manage and balance all of that you do, because you are in full-time education. I think you have a business of your own. You are a pause breathwork facilitator. You work with the pause company.
Mhm.
And then I'm sure, you have your own life, all of the personal stuff on top of that. Like, how does that work? How do you balance that?
Yeah. There's so many things that I could say about this. And this is something that, has taken me years to just really figure out what works for me. Because one thing's for sure, different things works for different people, and we have different capacities as well. I'm somebody with a lot of energy. So that's definitely present in my system. So I can do a lot in one day, and I have the energy for that. Of course, one piece of doing a lot of things period is taking care of ourselves. So sleeping, drinking water, eating well, moving our bodies. That's definitely important. That's not anything groundbreaking. But other aspects of this, a big one for me is goal setting, right? Setting goals for every quarter, setting goals for every month, breaking that down in every week. Then based on my weekly goals, I put that in my Google Calendar, right? Because, one thing I know is that I can tell myself that I'm going to work out, but if it's nowhere in my calendar, it's going to fall through, right? So making sure that I plan and make time for the things that are important for me. And that includes blocking off evenings to have time with my boyfriend, where I'm away from Slack and emails and homework and all of these things, right? Because that's also really important just for our mental headspace, and also for time to rest. So making goals is really helpful, and having systems that work for us. Having systems, we can spend so much time thinking about the things that we have to get done. How do I create systems for myself where it's like all out there, it's all mapped out, and I don't have to like worry, did I forget this thing? Is this thing done? Is this thing, oh, I need to submit this other thing? That can take so much mental and physical energy. So I found that to be really, really helpful. And the biggest one, if I kind of add a third third tip on this one, would be time blocking. Just creating blocks where we focus on one thing. So a school block, a call block. And this is great for every entrepreneur, every solopreneur. When we try to balance like admin and client work, these are two very different states. These are two very different headspaces. So having time where we can just kind of do admin, do like really, kind of boring logistical stuff, and then having times where I'm just seeing clients back to back, and I can kind of be in the right state and that flow. That's super supportive, because we can lose so much time by kind of shifting into different states of like, oh, I'm like doing email, and then I'm doing client work, and it's like, oh, it's all clunky. So having those blocks is super helpful.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that with me. I'm like, no wonder I just absolutely latch onto you and love you. Like goal setting, systems, time blocking, it's fun. Like it's fun for me. That's what I love to help my clients with, ultimately, more than anything, even breathwork. Secret. I love breathwork, but it's like, let's get into your goals and systems. It's so supportive. What is one of your favorite systems right now?
I love using Notion. I'm a big Notion girly. It's a beautiful platform that really allows us to really structure everything. We can make it custom, tables and all the things. I'm very visual. That works for me. Seeing things that I can click off, and that just feels really helpful to my system. So having that is so supportive, and it's not, when I'm speaking to this in terms of efficiency, I like efficiency a lot more than productivity. I don't know about you. But to me, it's not about let's be more efficient so I can do more work. It's about how can I be more efficient so I have a balance of time off as well. There's spaciousness in my schedule. And that's really, from my perspective, what differentiates this from like hustle, right?
Yes. Yeah, thank you for naming that. And spaciousness was the word that came to my mind too as you were talking. Is I have so often found myself in like in that system, so in those goals, and I just get so into it. I just get deeper and deeper and deeper. And there is this level of gratification. I am checking things off. I am accomplishing what I'm achieving, but then I'm drained and I'm exhausted and I'm physically unwell. And so when you have that spaciousness, you've created your systems and you're accomplishing your goals so that, and you're intentionally creating that time, right? You're intentionally creating that time for that self-work, that spaciousness. What do you do in that time?
Yeah. For me, it's all about connection, people around me, my family, my boyfriend, my friends, and also just moving. When I love my work so much. I'm so passionate, and I also spend a lot of time sitting at a desk in a day. And
Yeah.
so I need to balance that out, even in terms of my system, my physical system between sessions. I need to move my body. And that's something that I set goals around too. I feel like, I don't know about, the clients that you see and the people that you support, but oftentimes people think of goals and they're going to set goals for their business, but that's the only area. From my perspective, it's like, how do I find like some balance even in my goals themselves? And that can be movement, that can be resting more, that can be, all of these things can be goals as well. So having that broad lens and broad perspective helps, from in my experience.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you. Have you always been good at goals and systems? Has that always been
Um,
part of your just, your natural state?
yeah, that's a good question. I'm a Virgo. I
Okay.
feel like I should start this answer. That's how I should start this
Yeah.
answer. I've always been very into like having a planner and being organized.
Mhm.
For me, there's stress that comes in my body with not having a sense of direction, even for my day, or even not
Yeah.
having things written down, especially with a business. If I have emails to reply to, if I don't make notes of things, can't keep track of my tasks, that's stressful. And from my perspective, if I can find ways to support myself, right? And that's more of an active form of self-care than just kind of resting and taking a bath. But creating those things have been really helpful. And I've learned a lot, since having a business of my own, especially, as I said, as a solopreneur. It's a big learning curve. It's a really big learning curve to just like, oh, it's like, I can't really delegate. I mean, I could, but also
Yeah.
I'm in charge of all these things. So how do I manage my time and my own energy, and how do I take responsibility for that?
Mm. That's so good. That makes me want to dig into my astrology a little bit. I'm a naturally organized person. I'm a Cancer though. So it's not,
Mm.
that's not the Virgo attachment there. That's so interesting to me. Um,
Mm.
and I loved how you were talking into how your organization, your systems, your tracking, your goal setting, how that's self-care.
Mhm.
I think that what I've seen, and probably you've seen a little bit too, is I've seen those things become almost self-harming to
Mhm.
people, where they're using it as a measure of like inadequacy, right? Or they're using it to like they're not good enough, so they need to do all these things. And there's also on the other side of that, there's this idea that self-care is just, taking a bath or reading a book, which is
Mhm.
great, and there's space for that too. But
Mhm.
I don't know that I've ever had a mentor name it quite how you just named it, to where it just
Mm.
settled in my system a little bit differently. I am a huge planner person. I have my Google Calendar and I have my physical planner. If it's not in my physical planner, I get that stress comes forward in my system that you were talking
Mhm.
about. And so I've known this about myself without putting the language to it, that my planner is my self-care. Like
Mhm.
that just keeps me aligned, centered, grounded. And it's like I have 3 weeks written out in my planner and I don't have to think about them. I don't have to give them any space. It's like if something comes up, I'm like, oh, I dropped that here. It's safe.
Mhm.
Like that safety in that container is so,
Mhm.
so powerful and so, so helpful for me to be present for my clients, to be present in
Mhm.
life, to be present for my kids, for my husband in the time that I can, step away from it all. That's really
Mhm.
awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love how you name that, because freeing that mental space is so supportive in managing our stress, and managing just how we feel about things and how present we can be. Because if our brains is all over the place trying to keep track of everything we have to do, sometimes it's really hard to be present, especially in the type of work that we do where we're supporting people. We have to cultivate that sense of presence. So that, more active type of self-care can be really, really powerful for us. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. And I kind of want to switch directions for a minute.
Yeah, go ahead.
Now, my mind is wanting to lean into more of that developmental psychology. I'm really curious. I read a little bit about your personal journey, but I'm curious what really lended you to land in this developmental sphere with all that you've done, your somatic trainings, your breathwork trainings, then bringing on this clinical aspect. Yeah, I'm curious what that looks like for you or what that even means. Like, what is developmental psychology? What does that mean?
Yeah. So developmental psychology is all about development. So how we move through transitions, how we move to continuity, right? How we change over time, but also discontinuity when we have rapid changes through our lives. So it's really fascinating how, from being little ones, we really move through development from like a sensory motor perspective, like our sensory system, our physical body learning how to walk and really grasping onto these skills, but also, cognitively, our ability to think, our ability to grasp really abstract concepts, our ability to understand who we are and what our place is in the world. So it's really powerful to think about it from like a multi-level perspective. When it comes to how I got into this work, there's like two levels to this answer. One of them is, something that's been so supportive to me and in my professional development has been following my curiosity. And that sounds so simple, but it's not, because sometimes it takes us to a place that doesn't make sense yet.
Yeah.
Right. And for me, that's been really big because there were times where I was like, I just want to know more about this thing. And at the time, it did not make sense necessarily based on what I was offering in terms of services. Right. And I didn't know what was ahead. I didn't know that I was going to study this a lot more. So following my curiosity was really powerful. And I was noticing, in different trainings or with different teachers, when they were speaking to experiences when we were in the womb or events that could happen with our caregivers when we were in the womb, for example, that was something that would really catch my attention. And I was very, very curious about. Another piece of this is my own personal experience. I've had health challenges as a baby. So my first few months of life were really, really challenging. That really impacted my system. And it's only, as an adult, like as a very much grown person that I met and interacted with practitioners who were trained enough to support me in a way that allowed me to move through that and allow my nervous system to mature. Because in some ways, there were really parts of me that were operating at like a very, very young age, even as an adult with a business and with, a boyfriend and a family and all the things, on the outside, it doesn't necessarily look like it. However, internally, it was creating a lot of like chaos and activation. And so having that personal experience for me, the way that my personal journey really informs my work is that I get very inspired when I try something or I try a modality and it feels so powerful to my journey. And there's a really big part of me of like, I want to bring this to people. I want to bring this to others, right? And so I definitely had that informed my kind of discovery and interest in developmental psychology as well. Just my own personal embodied experience. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for speaking to that. I so resonate with this path of curiosity that makes no sense, right? I mean, that's ultimately what landed me in this breathwork facilitator training program was like, I'm really curious about this. There's something here, and especially that trauma-informed piece that really just caught my attention. And I had no idea. I think in my, the first week we had to do a vision, what we see with breathwork and where this is going. And I was like, I have no idea. Like, I can't even begin to see how this is going to fit into my business, if it's even going to fit into my business. And, now it's very much a part of my business, very much a part of the work that I do with my clients, very supportive, but taking that leap of trust, leaping off the cliff, even sometimes to follow your curiosity, especially when there's like monetary attachments and
Mhm.
big time attachments that come along with that. I'm curious, was that modeled to you, or what is it about your story that really helped you take those leaps? You know?
Mhm. Yeah, no, that's a great question. I have no entrepreneurs in my family, so that's not something that was
Yeah.
modeled to me in any way. And that's a big piece that I had to work through for the first few years of my business, because I had a very big part of me that had the belief that like there's no way I'm gonna make money doing this. And that was not my voice, right? That was everyone else's voice that I was hearing through me, that I had internalized, in other words, right?
Yeah.
So definitely not. And what helped me, when I started my business, every time I would interact with somebody that I admired, right? A teacher, a mentor, I would look up the trainings that they had completed. And there's a part of me that was like, okay, I'm just going to follow their path and I'm going to do the same thing, right? Not that I would end up doing it, but there was this thought, right? Of like, oh, what if I just follow this and do the same thing they did? And what I have found to be really powerful is that when I followed my yes to a training or to something I was curious about, or even sometimes to a new offering that I wanted to offer that didn't necessarily make sense, but that I felt really excited about, I felt really different about it, right? It felt a lot more fun. It felt more playful. It felt more exciting. And I think over time, if we're making this, let's say, specific to this journey of learning, but also creating a business, I just gathered evidence that it's like, oh, I get to do this. And there's a point where it starts making a lot more sense, but we only know that down the road. And so how do we support ourselves in finding some safety or some level of safety as we go through the journey? And a big part of that can be our support system, can be people around us who are like, hey, I mean, I got you. You're going to be great at this,
Yeah.
right? Even though it might not be making sense. And that's not available to everyone. And sometimes that's in a coach, sometimes that's in a therapist, a partner, a friend. But having that support system can be so helpful along the way.
That's so good. I definitely, like, as I think back the last several years that I've been investing in myself and in my
Mm.
business, I think the majority of those investments have been like, I told one of my past coaches one time, I was like, I'm mostly just paying you to be my friend. Like, I'm literally just sending you
Mm.
some money so that you'll just show up for me and like support me and be here, like just that support system. And I would joke with
Mm.
her at the time, but actually the reality is that I found and create safety for myself in gathering a few key people, even like just paying them as a coach. It
Mhm.
was it was essential for my journey to
Mm.
have that, right? And to create that in my life. I think that's really, I think that's
Mhm.
good. I think that's okay. And now I'm in a place and my nervous system has come to a place where I can cultivate friendships that don't have that
Mm.
monetary exchange, right? Where I don't have to like pay them to make it feel like they'll stay with me.
Mhm.
Um, but that took a lot of work, right? That took a lot of trial and error. And ultimately, like you said, like building up that evidence in my system and in my
Mhm.
experience that it is okay and that it is safe to chase after your dreams and go after these big business ideas
Mhm.
and change your big business ideas every 2 weeks, regardless of what family says. And that it's okay. And like looking
Mhm.
back now, I know that in 10 years from now, I'm going to look back and have even more clarity. But even now, I'm
Mhm.
about 5 years into my business and everything, as vast and different as it seems, like it does mold together and it's beginning to make sense. Um,
Mhm.
yeah, so I really just resonate with your journey in that. Thank you.
Mm. Yeah. Thank
Yeah.
you for sharing that. And it feels good. At least it felt good to me when I started seeing that thread. But
Yeah.
sometimes we have to get to a certain point to look back and see that thread. And in the moment it can feel so confusing, right? And there's no dismissing of how confusing it can feel and sometimes how lonely. Because for some folks, there isn't that support system or there isn't access to a therapist or a coach, and that can feel really lonely to chase our dreams. And yeah,
Yeah.
it's gonna come together. It's gonna come together
Yes.
at some point.
Yeah. And that really brings me to the nervous system
Mm-hmm.
because like just kind of reflecting on my personal journey and then you talking about how you had your development and your path here is that there was a certain point in my personal growth journey and as I've been growing this business as an entrepreneur where I started to recognize and I still don't have great language around it. I'm sure you could help me with this, but I started to recognize that I'm having some blocks that my mind couldn't cut through. I had some things in my system. I had some stories, like, I couldn't quite figure it out. And only now, looking back and having gone through this breathwork program, have I been able to really name and realize that it was that somatic piece, right? It was that body work that I personally I hadn't done for, the first 4 years of my journey. And ultimately where this energy that's, still very much alive in me in a lot of ways, but where it came from and what I've been working through, it was that inner child. It was those inner child wounds. It was those really early on ruptures I love that you use that word ruptures, those ruptures in my system that were coming forward and still impacting me today as a mom, as a wife, as an entrepreneur. And so I would love to hear from your perspective as an entrepreneur. I know you facilitate this work a lot, right? But from your perspective as an entrepreneur, how has your path of healing supported you in your own personal path and like with, supporting clients?
That's a beautiful question. Couple of different ways. One being my ability to be present with clients, right? My ability to regulate my system as we move through the session, because we're humans first. I think it's important to remember. Sometimes our clients, I do a lot of trauma work. Sometimes clients bring something very big into the session, which is beautiful. That's what the space is for. And my system might be responding, right, to this big event or this big story. So how do I support myself? So developing these skills allow me to stay present. And, in turn, if I stay present, they can co-regulate with me, right? Which they can't do if I'm like all up here. So that's one piece, like the client work itself, that really shifted something. The more we have capacity to be with our own emotions, the more we can also be with the ones, other people's emotions, right? Without dismissing or kind of moving too fast it, because there's a discomfort. If I can stay with that discomfort within myself, right, we can move through things in a very different way. And in client work, that can come up. Sometimes there are those moments of, misalignment or misattunement, and it's not always easy to move through, right? But if I can settle my own system, that can have a huge impact. So there's this level. And on another level, in terms of business, from my perspective, nervous system work is so powerful in changing our relationship with money, right? Yeah. That's a really big one. And, as entrepreneurs, obviously, we want to make a living. We want to, oftentimes we have goals even bigger than that. Yeah. And, we have moments where we get out of our own comfort zones, right? I've been doing more events. This is not something I would have been able to do in an easy way or on the fly in the same way when I started my business. So having the capacity to, get out of my comfort zone. Oof, that was a big event. That was a big milestone. Let me just settle back and make time to integrate. Right. So that kind of pacing can also be really helpful. And if I kind of circle back to money for a moment, it's really helpful in having the ability to receive. For many of us, that's such an edge in this type of work, right? That's such an edge. It's so hard to quantify transformation, right? And put a price on it. Yeah. And so that's such an edge for so many. And, through my work at Pause, I get to speak to folks all the time who are starting businesses or business owners. And so many of us have struggled with this. And for me, building my capacity over time also meant, like I can feel my worth. I don't have to prove it. What's the pricing that feels good, but also accessible to the people that I support? So we meet and it's a win-win. Yeah. Because I don't need to charge $800 an hour because I want to prove to everybody that I know my worth. Yeah. Right? Because that's the other side of the pendulum as well. There's the not charging and the I might have something to prove. So how do I land in a place that might feel more embodied and more grounded in what I offer, who I support, right? The market in the place that I'm in, the community that I'm serving. So for me, having that sense of safety in my own system has been so supportive. And last piece I will add, a lot less self-sabotage. When we can be more self-aware, when we meet our edges, there's a lot less of that sabotaging, which I don't love that word, but it's a word that, most of us can relate to in some ways. But to me, it's really about I'm moving into a state of protection. So I'm going to push that thing away. I'm going to avoid it. I'm going to run away from it, whatever it might be. Right. So having more capacity, it's like, oh, this is like big. I'm noticing the part of me that wants to run away from this thing. How do I settle myself and support myself and maybe doing something different? So that piece is also a huge piece of this work for sure.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Okay. The next question I have for you is kind of a selfish question. It's for myself.
I love that.
And I know it'll benefit so many. So I am nearing the end of my the program at Pause, right? So I'm nearing graduation, and it was so interesting to me doing so. For those who are watching, in our Pause training, we do little practices with our fellow students. So I was doing one of the very last practice with one of my fellow students, and we were working on that ability to receive. So she was guiding me in a breath session. I was just like 5 minutes, just dropping in and being open to receive and feeling her love and trying to like bring that into my system. And I had no idea how closed off I am to receiving. Like that little mini breathwork session, just like it brought into my awareness how thick the shields are around me, like this like impenetrable steel wall almost of being unable to receive, and which is just great awareness. Like I'm so grateful to have that awareness. And I think that a lot of people like us in this entrepreneurial world, we are here to serve others. I think so many of my clients would resonate with that. I'm here to serve women. I want to learn, and then I want to give that to the world. And so like you were saying, on that flip side of that coin is this is my question for you. How do we begin to titrate that experience of being able to receive? Like, how do we feel that? How do we increase that? Yeah. Any thoughts there?
Yeah, there's so many ways that we might want to play with this. Breath is one, right? Sometimes it's like, how do I, let's say, visually place that thing that I want to receive in the room? And how can I breathe that in little sips in a way that feels, oh, I can manage it. We can also play with this where it's like, let's say that I'm putting out there like a new business offering and I want to sell out that program, let's say. I might place that program on the other side of the street. And as I'm in practice, which could be breathwork, but could also be meditation, can I bring that closer to me? Which sounds really simple. And there might be a point where our system starts feeling like this, or we start checking out. And that's where we might get curious. Can I feel safety as this thing gets closer to me? Right? Can I anchor back into safety as this thing is coming closer? And maybe for one day, it's enough to bring it, let's say on the same side of the street. And then we get to revisit that. That's also part of titration, titrating ourselves in this process. But playing with distance can be really powerful, really, really powerful. And sometimes, for others, it might be more of like a journaling piece. Writing that vision down, seeing it, noticing how my body responds, and getting curious about that, right? Visualization can be really powerful, but it's not necessarily fun or accessible for everybody. So we can play with this in different ways. But whatever that is, pacing ourselves is the most important thing for sure.
Yeah, thank you so much. That I've never actually heard anyone say it that way. And that seems so simple to just visualize the thing, but then placing it at a distance that feels manageable and then bringing it closer. Like that is so simple. And yet I can just feel it in my system that that's going to be so supportive for me, and an invitation, for those who are watching to practice that as well. I see like, any goal, like just any goal that you set, just bringing your awareness to, and just even noticing in the beginning how distant it feels and the safety in that, and bringing it closer, as a practice to receive, but as a practice of what you were talking about earlier of feeling your worthiness inside of yourself, like just, am I worthy now, here as I am? And can I bring that into my system? I think there's just so many beautiful overlaps and pieces there. That's so cool. I'm excited to try that.
Yeah, let me know how it goes.
I will for sure. I will for sure. Oh,
Mm,
that's amazing. Laurie Ann, thank you so much. Thank you so much.
mm.
As you were talking, I also want to name for the viewers little like bragging piece that I just know you. Laurie Ann just did a breath session for 50 COOs at MIT. Is that right? I just feel like that's like so big. Like that is so cool to be able to be
So
bringing this
fun.
work to new corners, right? To new edges. And from this perspective, I mean, I think breathwork can get such a label as like such a spiritual thing, and it is so spiritual, but it's also just
Mm,
so helpful for regulating that nervous system and for
mm,
integrating into working through trauma pieces and to managing that stress and all of the things that you talked today about as you're an entrepreneur and you're juggling all of the things in life. Breathwork is so supportive for living that fulfilled life that most of us, if not all of us, are seeking. So I'm just grateful to know you. You
mm.
are a badass mentor.
Thank
Love you so much.
Yeah, I love you. I'm so grateful that we got to do this today. It's so nice to see you.